Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for participating in today's webinar. And I was a little intimidated by the vast expanse of PR knowledge in the room today. So this is one person's perspective, having participated in this process for close to 20 years. I learned some things along the way that I think are helpful tips, but I think there are great resources out there within FPRA, and I'll talk a little bit about that at the end when you actually begin working on your entries that you could reach out to for additional help as well. I want to start with just an overview of the program, because I think if you're new to the program and you've never actually participated, it can be a little overwhelming. If you've gone to participated in your organization in, like, let's say the ADDIE Awards, which is basically you take an ad or you take some kind of creative piece and you mount it to a piece of hardboard and you write a check and you submit it, and that's how it goes. There's really no writing involved, no building notebooks and things. So at first glance, the Image Award can be a little overwhelming for first-timers. So I hope to break that down a little bit so that it is not as overwhelming as you might think. FPRA, the Golden Image Awards, has been around for a long time, and it really is the defining PR standard for public relations programming in the state. There is no other statewide program that recognizes great PR work, and so it's a great opportunity for us as professionals to be able to participate in that and have our work looked at outside of our normal audiences. So it is a two-tiered process, and I think a lot of people are confused about that. There's some great advantages of that. If you're a part of a chapter that has a local Image Awards, you're probably going through that now or getting pretty close to your deadlines for those local Image Awards. And then the second level, of course, is the statewide, which is the Golden Image. The beauty of it is you don't have to participate in the local to compete at the state level. So if you have something, if you happen to miss this year's deadline for local and you'd like to enter at the state level, you can go directly to the state. You don't have to, you're not required to win at a lower level like the Addies and then advance to Golden Image Awards. So it's open to everyone. And but the beauty of it is if you do participate in the local, you get a notebook, and you build this whole notebook, and the rules and guidelines for the state competition are exactly the same as the local. So you really, other than changing out the first page, which requires a new entry form for the state level, the rest of your notebook can stay exactly the same. So you're really only doing the project once or the notebook once, and then you're able to enter it into two different levels of competition. So a great benefit of having that mirror each other like that. Again, I just want to reemphasize this process. Obviously it's an awards program, and so the end result, the prize, if you will, is the award. But really, I think the real benefit of this and the real prize for me personally is that it makes you a better PR professional. I have, in my office, I have notebooks dating back to 1995, and I probably have a lot more notebooks that I didn't win anything versus ones that I did. And that being said, I think the important thing to remember is when you do this, it's helping you work through that RPI formula that we all learned in school about how public relations works. And I think that the Image Awards gets you thinking about how to set goals, how to plan, how to execute, how to measure, how to evaluate. So it really helps you on a day-to-day basis, even though you might only be working on your entry a couple of weeks before the deadline. Really, it's a year-round process that allows you, even from the outset of starting an event or a project or a campaign, that you're already starting to think strategically. So it's a great program. Even if you enter and you don't win anything, I guarantee you'll walk away with a new appreciation for what you're doing, and also your employer, your boss, is looking for, to make sure that the PR component of your organization is kind of pulling its weight and really doing some great things. So this is a great tool for you, both personally and professionally. I just want to spend a few minutes just talking about the awards themselves, because I think that it can get confusing. The awards are pretty much the same at the local level as the state. There are a couple of exceptions, but in general, we have the Award of Distinction, which it's often common to receive multiple awards of distinction in a category. Those basically, the judges, when they start reviewing all the entries, they will establish a standard of excellence in a particular score, and then everything that scores above that, it will be automatically given an award of distinction. Now, the highest award or the highest scoring entry in that particular category receives the Golden Image Award. And occasionally we do have ties in that category, but more often than not, there's just a single winner in each category. And so again, awards of distinction are you meet the minimum standard of excellence, and then the Golden Image in that category would be the top scoring entry. Now, the Judges Award, if you're from a nonprofit or a government like I am, Judges Awards are valued equally as a Golden Image Award in terms of getting the most bang for your buck. Basically, this is a special award given by the judges that when they see that an entry achieves large results, impressive results, using a minimum amount of budget. And we all have tighter budgets these days, and so this really is a confirmation that what you're doing is being done and executed well. Then above that, if you can take all the image awards in a particular division, there's going to be one grand. So I'll talk about the divisions in just a minute, but there's going to be one grand in each category. So there's going to be a best grand in categories B, C, and D, and then the overall top award, the Grand All Image, is the top award winning award in Division A. And so those are the awards that will be given out in August at our state conference, and just so you have an idea on kind of what you're reaching for. Okay, in the competition, there is actually 4 divisions. There are 3 professional divisions and 1 just for students. Now, the students can enter in the other categories, but obviously the competition is a little more intense if they do that. So that's why we have a category set aside just for students. But we have public relations programs, printed tools of public relations, and then audiovisual online tools of public relations. And basically, what we have these set up like this is that allows you to, depending on what entry you have, to find an area or a category that is most appropriate for that category. So let's say Division C, audiovisual. If you're involved in a website or an online newsletter or a video news release, even a PowerPoint presentation, those would all fall under those audiovisual online tools. And there's actually 12 categories within Division C, and then there's the other category, which each division has an other category, because sometimes there's projects that may not fit perfectly into any of the categories. So they do have an other category. In Division B, that's printed tools, and that's obviously things that can be printed, annual reports and brochures, magazines, newsletters, posters, even news releases, written speeches, things like that. And then specialty items. If you do a special event and you have your logo or an event logo or something printed on a specialty item, those also would be included under printed tools. Now, Division A is a little bit different, because what it requires is you have to have 2 or more tools to submit it as a program, meaning that, let's say you do a special event, So if you enter it, you have to have two events that, two tools that support that event. For example, a special event, you might use a news release. Okay, so that's one tool. You might use a website. There's another tool. You might have a promotional item. So you've got multiple tools that are supporting a single public relations program. So the benefit of that is that it really shows those Division A really carry a lot of weight because they're full campaigns. They're not just measuring the success of one individual tool, but you're looking at a whole campaign. So again, public relations category or Division A, you have to have two or more tools that you use. Now, one of the things that you can do is, and it's okay to do, is if you enter as a public relations program, you can also enter those individual tools in their separate categories. So if you wanted to enter your special event in A with those supporting tools included, that's good. And then in B, if you wanted to include those individual tools, are good. The only thing you can't do is you can't copy your two-page summary and just use the same two-page summary for all three entries. They have to be unique entries, obviously because you're measuring the effectiveness of each individual tool in the other categories, whereas A, you're looking at the whole program. So we often see that where everybody is entering the tools as well as the program itself. Okay, judging criteria. Obviously, these are the foundations of our profession. So each entry is required to address these 5 areas. We have research and situation analysis. You basically want to explain to the judges what you're actually doing. And you have to keep in mind, too, that very oftentimes the people reading these are not people that know, number one, don't know anything about your organization or your company, and number two, they might not know anything about the issue that you faced. So you need to make sure you're writing this to an external audience, that somebody who, and sometimes it's even a good idea to have somebody proofread these before you submit them by somebody that's not in your own industry, because you want to make sure you're staying away from industry jargon and just terms and things that might not be familiar to the average person. But you want to summarize the situation. If there's research involved, you want to share your research. Obviously, what we do is we're trying to shape opinion and oftentimes trying to get people, we're trying to move the needle on something, on an issue or whatever, and so we need to have some idea where we're starting, so then at the end of the program or the campaign, we can measure and see where we came from. So any research that's involved, and I know people often say, well, we don't have money for research, and really the research can be informal research. It can be a SurveyMonkey survey to clients or members or customers or whatever. There's so many low-cost or no-cost tools these days for research that it really makes it, even for small organizations with no budgets, still be able to do that. Bottom line is we want to know what the issue is that you're facing, your audiences, your strategy, and that's kind of what you highlight in your research section. The second part is objectives, and measurable objectives. I can't stress that enough, and I talk about that a little bit further in the presentation. But the number one issue that, as I've been a judge for many years in the Image Awards process, and the number one repeated comment we have is lack of measurable objectives. So you need to keep in mind that when you set these objectives, that there's something, let's say, you don't want to just say, well, we want more people to read our newsletter. We want to say, well, our current readership is this, and we want to increase it by 20%. So that's something that you can directly measure and know the outcome of if you were successful. So you just want to make it, whether it's qualitative or quantitative, you just want to make sure that it's a measurable objective that can be measured after the fact. In terms of implementation, that, and we'll see that carries a little bit more weight in the scoring section implementation, because that's really where you're explaining what you're doing and kind of rolling out the whole plan and how you did it, how you achieved that. So you want to outline those steps. The evaluation is really where you sum up your original objectives. And one of the things that you want to make sure is that you're addressing each one. One of the things that I do that I find helpful is once you establish your objectives when you're writing and you've put all your objectives for your program into the summary, I always copy those same objectives and I dump them into my evaluation section. So when I get to writing that, I make sure that I address each of the individual goals, because it's really easy, especially when you're limited to 2 pages and you get to that second page and you start looking at ways of trimming and cutting, and oftentimes we see goals that were mentioned in the beginning and objectives for the program, but at the end they leave 2 or 3 of them off. They never address them, and we never know if they were met. And obviously that's going to affect your score. So just a good practice is just kind of, once you've written that part of and listed all your objectives, copy that over into the evaluation section. Not that you have to use that same verbiage, but as you write and address each one of those objectives, you can delete the original copy. It's just a way to remember that you're touching all those original objectives. And then there's the budget, which is the financial outlay for the campaign or the project or whatever you're doing. And it's important, you know, we do require that people report staff time. And I know that's caused some angst among primarily agencies, obviously, because their budgets are often confidential, and the process does not require you to detail the hourly rates or salaries or, you know, the total number of hours. We're just looking for a lump sum, and the reason we do that is to make sure we're comparing apples with apples. If you're looking at 2 campaigns and these people achieved this objective, and they had 1 person working 2 weeks on it. And then over here we have one where 17 people in the organization have spent 2 weeks on it. Well, obviously you have a huge disparity there, and that helps at least identify, okay, wow, they really spent a lot of staff time on this. And it's just one of those little nuggets that the judges need in helping evaluate the overall return on investment for the program or project. So again, you don't have to break it out into hourly rates and salaries and all that kind of stuff. You just need to make sure that you're reporting staff time as a lump sum. Okay, judging criteria. 70% of your total score is on the 2-page summary. So if you've never competed in the Image Awards process previously, you can see how heavy weight they put on the 2-page summary. And the judges, typically what happens is the judges who will be reviewing these Golden Image Awards receive the 2-page summaries ahead of time. And so really when they get together as a judging panel, they're really reviewing the actual notebook and the support materials. So they've already read that, so they have a pretty good idea in mind on what they want to look for specifically in your supporting material. And then the judges oftentimes will have to, if there's a tie score or whatever, that they have to kind of work all those things out, and they weigh it on the value of the entry and the support materials. So obviously with the 70%, you really want to devote a good amount of your time to being as clear and concise and factual in your 2-page summary. I think there's a there's a tendency to want to just provide as much detail as you can, and obviously it's difficult, especially if you're doing a long, let's say a year-long campaign or something. It's very difficult to compact that into a 2-page summary, but I think you want to hit the highlights. If you want to reference something in the notebook, that's helpful because the judges then can look specifically for something there. But again, 70% total score for the 2-page summary and 30% for the support materials. Now, next I want to just run through the actual judging form, because I think I always find that it's interesting to start with what the judges are going to. We've kind of started at the end here with showing you the different awards, and now we're going to look at the judging form itself. And we'll actually go through the form that the judges use when they score your entries. And it's kind of helpful because specifically they're going to be addressing these questions. The first question that's asked on the scoring form is, are all 5 elements of the summary addressed? And so this is why it's critical, because it's at that moment that your entry can either be qualified or disqualified. So you want to make sure that you've got all 5 of these, which we spoke of earlier, but all 5 of these components in each entry that you submit. Okay. So, and then I have the point spread here, and that basically, it adds up to 100 points, but it shows you, I just put that there so you kind of knew what the weighting was for each of these areas. Research, situation analysis, it's valued at 10%, and they're going to be looking for how well did the entry identify and explain the problem or issue. How well were the target audiences identified? Did the plan appear to meet the objectives in solving and meeting the problem? So again, we deal with the research and situation. Okay, objectives, also worth 10 points. They're going to be looking for how clearly did you meet the specific objectives of the plan that you stated, and also, are you addressing the problem? How well did you address it through those goals and objectives? And then, really, I think it's helpful to know there are generally 3 types of goals. I know if you're not familiar with writing PR plans, there's generally kind of 3 types of goals here. You have kind of a reputation management goal, and would be an example would be like, we aim to improve stakeholder opinions of our organization. Okay, so you're really dealing with your reputation and opinions and kind of that kind of realm. Next would be relationship management goals. And that would be how you connect with your stakeholders. Like we aim to improve communication with our shareholders by 20%. So you're really dealing not with the organizational reputation, but the relationship management there. And then last would be task management goal, which is your typical, achieving tasks. Our goal is to increase attendance at a staff meeting or town hall meeting or something. So that kind of helps you if you're trying to develop goals, maybe to kind of that they should fit into one or more of those 3 kind of subsets of that. Next we have implementation. You can see it's worth 3 times as much as the first 2. Obviously, and I mentioned this earlier, that it's how important it is to really detail your plan of action and what you did, the activities, how did you address those targeted audiences, and they're looking for the overall professionalism of the plan execution and creativity, and is there innovation there that that helps seal the deal there, in their mind as a high-scoring entry. Next we have evaluation, also 30 points. And, I'm sorry, that's just 10. That's an error I made. I apologize. This is 10%. And this is basically, again, to tie it back to your original objectives. Where the results, did you have good results? Did you tie them back? And, I think sometimes I find that people tend to be a little leery of if they don't meet a goal. And don't be afraid to do that. We all take on projects, and we set goals for these projects, and then we get into them, and maybe the budget was way more than you thought, or something happened in your process that was beyond your control, and it's okay to say that. It's we underestimated this, or I've read entries where they ran short of food at an event because they had 200 people RSVP, but they had 350 people show up, which is great for their event. Yes, there were some hungry people walking around, but the overall impact of their efforts in getting people to attend an event was was the goal there. So don't be afraid if that you fall short on one of your goals to include it, and explain why, because this is real life, and things happen all the time that may affect that. Then finally we have budget, which is, we talked a little bit about the salary part of it, but you want to provide some level of detail. You don't have to go into, you can break it up and say, let's say if it's an event, you could say, our food costs this, and our decorations cost this, and our invitations cost this, and just break those out. You don't have to get into, breaking out, subsets of all those things. It's just, the judges want to get an idea on how the money was spent and how the program was executed. So, and bottom line is they're looking for to rate the entry's effectiveness in relationship to its budget. And this is where the judge's award comes into play, is if it's really an effective program in relationship to the budget, then judges will give it a judge's award. Okay, the last 30 points, and we've got the 70 there that we had talked about, that the 70% of your score is those items that we just touched on. Your remaining 30%, or 30 points, is support material. And you need to put everything in there that you mentioned in your 2-page summary. You need to make sure you're including it also in the support material. I'll go back to an event again. If you have an event with 3,000 people, then you might want to include some photographs, because I think the judges are going to say, okay, did this really happen? And I've seen entries that have no photographs of large events or ribbon cuttings, and to me, photography, should be a part of most PR campaigns at some level. And so, you want to keep that in mind and make sure that if you say that you made your event or your product launch or whatever, made the front page of 5 newspapers, then you need to show the 5 newspaper headlines. You don't have to stuff the whole newspaper in there, but a screen capture of the front page helps solidify the entry. If you did a survey, you want to include survey results, or even the questionnaire itself, the actual instrument that you use to collect the data. There's all kinds of things, media clippings, photographs. If you did something that involved a T-shirt, you can tuck a T-shirt in there. It needs to stay within the confines of the notebook size, but if there's things that you did specifically to support that event, you want to make sure as much of it that is relevant. Now, one of the things that I think it's important to remember, and I have seen this in the past, is if you have a social media component to your entry, it's not necessary if if your plan included 500 tweets, you don't have to include individual pages with 1 tweet on each page, which I saw as recently as last year. If you have 500 tweets, maybe put a couple pages just showing them, and so they're reflected in the entry. But there's no need to fill the judge's time with 500 separate tweets for an event. So, but it's important to include that. Again, if you're mentioning something in your 2-page summary, everything you mention, you want to make sure you're backing up in some fashion in that support material. Okay, next is building the notebook, and this is probably we did a Image Awards workshop earlier this week for the Orlando chapter, and this is probably the most commonly asked question, and where I think a lot of people kind of trip up. Either they make mistakes or it intimidates them that they don't go beyond this part of the call for entries and decide not to enter. But building the notebook is very simple. It follows the same formula at the local as well as the state level. Your most helpful tool is going to be, there's an entry checklist in the call for entries, and when you're done, if you just run down that and check off, you'll have everything you need inside that notebook. But I want to go through and just kind of cover those things just to make sure that that everybody kind of understands what's required in that. So the order of content, if you were to look at a notebook, some people, you're required to use the 3-ring binder, but some people actually put little plastic sleeves because they don't want to damage. If you have a lot of original material and you want to damage it and punch holes in it, you can get those little plastic sleeves that you can then put inside the 3-ring binder and then put your stuff inside the sleeves to protect them. That's what most people end up doing. But your very first page is going to be your entry form. That's the last page of your call for entries. So you fill that out, and you assign the category and the division, and you put your credit card information or whatever, attach your check to that, and that's going to be your first page. Your second page is going to be one copy of your 2-page summary. Okay, now you're required to submit 4 copies, but 1 copy needs to be tucked in the notebook, actually into the binder. The other 3 remaining copies should be paper clipped together, and they should be in the front pocket of your notebook. So again, 4 total copies of your 2-page summary. 1 in the 3-ring binder as the second page. The other 3 will go in the front cover. The organizational overview. Now this is the third page in the book, and this is really helpful to the judges because, again, they probably don't know anything about your organization. I mean, for example, Orlando chapter's entries are being judged by the Capital chapter in Tallahassee. So it's very likely that they've never heard of our organizations here or their particular projects. So the organizational overview is an opportunity to talk about not only your organization and just a paragraph about what your company does, but also it allows you to talk about your PR team. Because if you go through it and you say, wow, they're a team of 1 and they pulled this off, this is really impressive. That adds to the scoring when the judges are evaluating this. They're like, wow, this was executed by a small staff. So that carries some weight. So the judges want to know where you're coming from in terms of company and mission of your company and what you do, and also the size of your PR team. So that's what you want to include on your organizational overview, which is your 3rd page. Following that, you add all your supporting material. Again, media clips, photos, any kind of supporting documentation, you want to attach all of that into the 3-ring binder. At your very last page of your entry, after all the supporting material, your very last page will be a 50-word summary, a typed summary of the whole effort of the whole project or entry. And then attached to that is an envelope with a CD, a labeled CD. You want to make sure you're labeling it with your company name and everything. So if it gets separated from the notebook, which it will, they can identify which entry it belongs to. But that CD that's in that envelope attached to the 50-word summary must contain 3 things: the 2-page summary in Word, the 50-word summary in Word, and then a JPEG or TIFF image representing the entry. Now let me just go back and say, so you ask, why do they require that? Well, the 2-page summary is used for when they actually communicate to the judges. Depending on the preference, some judges like to get the actual hard copies, some like to get it electronically. So that's the first reason. The second is that the state office produces a kind of a conglomeration of the 2-page summaries and makes it available, and it's also on their website. So they need it in electronic format as well, so that they can put that up on the website. So that's why that's required. The 50-word summary is, if they're using your 50-word summary, it's a great thing, because that means that you've won an award and your 50-word summary becomes part of the event script. So again, I think what's best is if you can keep in mind when you're writing your 50-word summary is, imagine a room full of people at state conference in St. Petersburg in August, and they you have a whole room full of people who know nothing about you, your organization, or your campaign, or your project. And so this is, in 50 words, it's kind of a short elevator speech. In 50 words, if you could explain that to somebody who knew nothing about it, that's what you want to do. Again, it will go into the script and become and read it at the audience. Now, combined with that is the next item, which is the JPEG or TIFF image representing the entry. Now, one of the things is as they're reading your 50-word summary as you walk up to the stage to receive your award, they're showing something on the screen. Well, what they're showing on the screen is what you've submitted here as an image representing the entry. What they don't want is a bunch of company logos, because that doesn't tell me or anybody else who's watching or sitting in the audience anything about the program. So you want to find an image that really captures the essence of what you entered and what you submitted. So if you did a kids event in the park and there's 500 kids, you want to have a picture of 500 kids in the park. You don't want a picture of your nonprofit logo. It's okay. I know a lot of organizations that put maybe a smaller corporate logo, in the bottom right corner, and that's fine. But they're really not looking for logo slides. They're looking for something that, in front of all these people, that really captures through text and through imagery, really kind of sells your entry. And then we've had some really great ones. If you've been to the FPRA Golden Image Awards in the past, we've had some really great, funny slides that or images that people have submitted that are really reflective, but also, they really kind of help the event move along too and make it fun. One of the things I think that's helpful in building the notebook are tabs. If you're, you have to think about these judges that these aren't full-time judges that this is what they do for a living. These are volunteers. In this case, I believe all our Golden Image entries are being judged in Pennsylvania this year. So you have a bunch of PR professionals in Pennsylvania who are giving up their own time, whether away from work or whether away from their families, and they're judging these entries. So whatever you can do in preparing your notebook to make it easy to find things works to your benefit. So tabs, obviously, if you have a photo section, if you have a media clipping section, that's helpful, because if they go through and they've read your two-page summary and they said, oh, I want to check out this, this, and this in their notebook, well, if they have to spend all this time going to a notebook, it can eat up a lot of time, and oftentimes they can't get to what they wanted to see. So the tabs are helpful. It's just a way to kind of bring attention to things and people don't have to hunt so hard for that. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up with this, and then we'll go into question and answers in just a minute. Here's some common mistakes to avoid, and having judged this for many years, I see a lot of the same recurring issues. So the number one thing I can't stress enough is read the directions. The FPRA state office goes to great lengths to provide this call for entries that has everything you need to to build your notebook and to get your entry ready and to submit it. And there's even, and also I wanted to just touch real quickly on, if you submit your entry and you're not quite sure that it's the right entry or the right category or the right division, you can always call. You can call the state office and they can clarify that for you. There's always the other category. But I want to stress that if it's in the wrong category, you're not going to be disqualified if you put it in the wrong category. The judges will move it to the correct category and it will be judged in that category. So, but bottom line, read the directions and the call for entries. They cover just about everything that you would need to know. Again, stress that the goals and objectives, they have to be measurable. This is the most repeated comment that we make each year when we're evaluating entries from other chapters. So it's very, very important that you somehow can tie some kind of measurable component to that goal. It's got to be in a hardcover, stiff spine, 3-ring binder, no larger than 3 inches. Yes, they do make them that are 4 and 5 inches, but the state office has to ship these all over the United States when these are judged. And it's not only a lot of weight; it's a large expense in shipping. And so when they say stick to that, and really if you can't narrow your, as PR professionals, where we're all trained to get right to the point, if you can't get to the point in less than a 3-inch notebook, you probably need to evaluate it a little closer. You should be able to, no matter how large the campaign is, that you should be able to fit it within those parameters. 2-page summary. Now this is very, very important. This is probably the second most critical error that people make. The 2-page summary has to be in Word, has to be 2 pages, double-spaced, 1-inch margin. They do measure, by the way. The font used must be Times New Roman, and it must be 10-point, not 9.97. We all know you can adjust all that kerning and leading on fonts and get them to do that. They do this because obviously if somebody didn't quite honor that or went with a different font, obviously a narrower font, you can get more copy on a page, so you have more room to tell your story. All we're trying to do here is keep it consistent so that your story and your entry and the next entry can be compared equally, because everybody's starting from the same place. So again, double-spaced, 2 pages, 1-inch margin, and the 10-point Times New Roman font. Online entries, this is another thing. Make sure, it's always a good idea, especially if you're entering in the audiovisual category, is put a printout of a screenshot of the website that you're sending people to. If you're saying, go check out my website or my blog or whatever, it's always a good idea to put a screenshot of that with the URL at the top, because there's a lot of URLs, and we've all experienced it, where one letter off and you're at a completely different website. So if I go and I accidentally miskey it, and I'm looking at your website going, oh, this is really nice, and I just realized I didn't even look at the right website, then I don't really know where I can find the correct website. So it's helpful to do a screenshot, put the URL on the same page so that they can line it up and say, okay, this is I'm in the right place. This is important to remember. Entries for the same project may not be entered in more than one category in the same year. And I touched on this earlier, that you can enter, if you do a campaign that uses 2 or 3 more tools, you can enter all those in those different categories, but it can't be the same entry. It has to be a unique entry and a unique 2-page summary for each of those categories. Some part of the entry for this year's Golden Image Award has to take place between January 1st of last year and May 17th of 2013, which is the deadline for Image Awards this year. It's also important to remember, oftentimes, just because something happened during that time, you may have started a project, it may be too early to submit it. So don't be afraid if you don't feel like you have a lot of research on the back end, at the end of this campaign, that you've had time to measure it. Let's say that you wrap up some program in April. You're probably not going to have a whole lot of time to really evaluate the success of that program, but that's okay, because next year's Image Awards or Golden Image Awards, you will have allow this time that we're in right now will be included in next year's entry. So some people feel compelled to enter it because they're like, well, we just did it and it's fresh, but oftentimes it's a stronger entry if you have more research to show the success of the program. So, you want to make sure that you have what you need, but not too early. Make sure that the supporting material must support the summary. Make sure you're including in there. If you say you did it, make sure you're showing that you did it through photographs or research or whatever you have there. And make sure you tie back to your original goals and your evaluation. That's how you're going to be able to measure the success, and that's how the judges are going to be able to measure the success. Watch out for shifting text. I've seen this a lot lately. We all have different versions of Word. Some people, uploaded, some companies are a lot more diligent about upgrading Word. If you're having multiple people review your 2-page summary, be very careful that in all those shifting back and forth that it's not slightly changing your margins or whatever. I've seen it so many times where the budget, which is at the end of your two-page summary, rolls onto a third page, and then you're disqualified because you just want to make sure if you're sharing it and with other people that are also reviewing it on their computer, that you just want to make sure that when you have the final version that you put on the disk and in the notebook, that the text hasn't shifted onto a third page. And also keep in mind the time of the judges. Again, they're volunteers. They're they're giving up time to do this, and so whatever you can do in building your notebook to make it easy and quick for them would be much appreciated. And finally, some resources. FPRA.org is a great resource for a variety of things, but particularly for Golden Image. All the winning summaries at Golden Image at the state level from 2004 to last year are there, and they're divided up by category. So it's great if you're thinking about entering an annual report. You can go back and see all the winners in the annual report category, and you can see what they've done. So that's very helpful. Also, your local Image Awards chair, if your local chapter is doing it, great resource. The state has an Image Awards Golden Image Awards Vice President that's happy to help, and of course the FPRA state office staff will be available if you have questions when you're putting together the entry. And finally, just some key dates moving forward. The Golden Image Award deadline is May 17th, and the awards are presented as part of the FPRA 75th Annual Conference in St. Petersburg, and we hope you can be there. And if you're kind of on the fence and you don't know if you're going to enter this year, you definitely want to go to conference and go to the Golden Image Awards and actually see the work that's recognized. It really makes you have an appreciation for what we do in our profession across the state. And with that, Sheree, I will send it back over to you.
Okay. We had a question while you were talking from Trish, I think while you were talking about preparing your supporting materials. I believe the question was, do we need to include internal costs, staff, and hours? So if you could address that, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, specifically, they're looking for, your actual hard costs. If you used a printer, if you used a caterer, whatever kind of hard cost, but also in terms of reporting staff time, agency time, it just needs to be expressed in the total dollar amount for the entire number of hours. So it's basically just a lump sum, and you can just say, and in salaries, staff time was X amount. And that's all you need to do. You don't need to get into any kind of detail on hourly rates or break it down by position or title or whatever. That's not necessary. It's just looking at the total dollar amount.
Okay. We also have a question from Kylie. She says, for the notebooks, are dividers ever used instead of tabs?
Sure. I suggested tabs, but dividers, anything that's going to help weed through that. I mean, if you think about going to a 3-inch notebook, you've got a number of, you just have a lot to look through. And so obviously if you can somehow separate it, that's very helpful, yes. Okay.
I'd like to remind attendees now you do have the hand-raising function, so to the left of your control, okay, I see a couple hands. Okay, I'm going to unmute your mic, Sherry Harlow. Okay.
Hello, yes. I just wanted to mention that if you have a loose item that you have in one of those plastic sheets and it could fall out, you might want to have a zipper pocket so that you don't lose that when judges are moving the books around.
That's an excellent point. And also, if something's large and doesn't fit in the notebook, then what's best is just to take a photograph of it and tuck the photograph inside the binder, because some of the larger things obviously aren't going to fit.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to mute your mic, Sherry, and I'm going to open up Trish's mic here in just a second. All right. Trish, you're on. Trish, you...
Great. So thanks, Chris. That was really helpful.
Sure.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
So, okay, great. So the deadline is May 17th, and where are we sending that? Are we sending those to the state office? I guess it'll be in the call to entries, but
yes, when the call for entries will be added to the FPRA website soon, and you'll get an email actually from the state office telling you where to go to download that. And the last page, the actual entry form, tells you where to ship it. But yes, it is to Sarasota,
okay,
to the state office.
And then one other question, and I should know this because I've looked at it on the website, but Sheree, if you can just remind me, the entries from all of the previous years that you mentioned, 2004 to last year, are those available and viewable to everyone, or is that member password protected?
Member password protected. So most everybody here today is a member. So what you want to do is when you log into fpra.org, enter your username, password. That'll take you to the active members page. And then on the active members landing page, look to the right of your screen, and you'll see the links for all the years past Golden Image winning entries.
Are there any available outside for non-members who may want to enter to give them, you know, a sample?
Yes, we do make that available for purchase, and that was what Chris referred to earlier, where we put together a packet. It's a printed packet that is made available for sale that people can purchase.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I'm going to go ahead and close your mic. Sherry and Trish, you can lower your hand by pushing your hand button again. And thank you. Do we have any other questions? Okay, we do. I see Kevin has a question. I'm unmuting you. Kevin?
Hey, Chris, it's Kevin up in Ocala. Quick
Hey
question.
there.
I had Carol, or was talking with Carol about an entry that I'm going to submit, but she's saying that it needs to go in the other category, and that kind of makes me a little nervous. Do I need to be nervous about that? What can you really need to be concerned with?
I have entered a lot in the other category, and there just are sometimes you do things and they just don't fit. Specifically for me, I've had the most time that I've used the other is in B, in printed tools, because you know, it goes from like a newsletter, but we did like a hurricane guide, and so it wasn't really it wasn't a magazine, because a magazine is a regular publication, and it wasn't a brochure, because that's, you know, it's not a brochure, and you know, so there really wasn't a category for that, and so the best place for it was other. So I wouldn't be afraid of that, because you're going to end up with a whole variety of people in that category. You know, but I don't think it lowers your chances at all of being successful and winning in that category.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Okay, do we have any other hands? Anyone else with a question? Okay. All right. At this time, I don't see that we have any questions. So that concludes today's webinar. I thank you all very much for joining us. Following today's presentation, you are all going to get a copy of Chris's PowerPoint in PDF form, and you'll also be receiving a webinar evaluation. We ask that you take the time to fill that out. Only take a few minutes, and that'll help us with future webinars. Also like to remind you that if you haven't signed up, we only have a few more virtual seats left, but next week we do have Jim Joseph, president of Cohen and Wolf North America, speaking about branding. The title is PR as a Contact Sport, and it should be very good. He was recently asked to, he was on Fox News immediately following the Super Bowl and speaking about the branding of the commercials, so it should be a very dynamic presentation. With that, I'd like to thank you again, and you all have a wonderful afternoon. This concludes our presentation.